US-Bangla Airlines Flight 211 struggles on approach to Kathmandu Airport.
It's very dangerous and the visibility is low in that area.
The plane was flying close to the ground.
Sir! Sir!
I thought that no one was alive there.
51 people are killed. Investigators try to determine if there was something wrong with the plane.
Take a look at these inputs. They're so extreme.
Or US-Bangla Flight 211 cruises above the Himalayas. Captain Abid Sultan is at the controls. He has more than 5,000 flying hours.
Request for descent.
Yes, it's time.
First Officer Pritula Rashid is a newcomer to US-Bangla Airlines. At age 25, she has less than 400 hours of flying time.
Kathmandu BS-211, request descent.
BS-211, Kathmandu approach. Descend to flight level 160.
Kathmandu BS-211, flight level 160.
Good.
Their destination is Kathmandu Airport in Nepal. There are 67 passengers and 2 cabin attendants on board. Basanta Bahora, a Nepalese travel agent, is returning from a business trip in Bangladesh.
We went to a travel agency award ceremony for 3 or 4 days. 10 top agencies were sponsored by US-Bangla, and we went to receive an award. We attended the event and then returned home.
It's a 90-minute flight from Dhaka to Kathmandu.
Kathmandu Airport is in the foothills of the Himalayas. It's on high ground, and although it's in a valley, it's on very uneven ground. Pilots consider it to be one of the most challenging airports in the world.
The crew is flying a Bombardier Dash 8 Q400.
It's a small plane, and it has low operational costs and is very popular with small airlines who are looking to keep their costs down.
Kathmandu BS-211, descend to 13,500 feet and hold over Guras.
BS-211, descend 13,500 feet, hold at Guras.
BS-211 is 6 minutes ahead of schedule. The controller gives the crew instructions to go into a holding pattern when they get to their next navigation point.
Do you remember how to enter a hold?
Nav page. Maneuver.
Very good.
The captain was extremely experienced and an instructor. He had flown in and out of Kathmandu repeatedly. He knew the route, he knew the plane better than anyone at that airline.
I'm looking forward to getting home.
The flight was absolutely normal. Some were reading newspapers, others were talking to each other.
BS-211 is now 20 miles from Kathmandu. First Officer Rashid makes contact with air traffic control at the airport.
Kathmandu Tower, BS-211, finals, runway 02.
BS-211 Tower, wind 8 knots, runway 02, continue approach.
BS-211 is on final approach to runway 02. Tribhuvan International Airport has one 10,000-foot airstrip. Planes approaching the airport from the south land on runway 02, and from the north on runway 20.
The two runway references are based on in which direction you are using the runway. Obviously, you do not want planes coming and going in both directions.
The aircraft is now 3 miles from runway 02.
BS 211, wind 220 degrees, runway 02, clear to land.
Clear to land, Bangla Star 211.
But BS 211 isn't ready to land.
Have you seen the runway?
No, not yet.
No problem. It'll be in front.
BS 211, you were given landing clearance to runway 02.
Affirmative, ma'am.
BS 211,
You were going towards runway 20.
BS 211 has overflown the entire runway and is now headed north towards the mountains.
I think we're going to runway 02.
Concerned by what he's seeing, the supervising controller steps in to assist Flight 211.
Okay, Bangla Star 211, runway 20, clear to land.
Kathmandu Air Traffic Control redirects BS 211 to turn left and land on runway 20.
Can you see the runway? Everything is all set up, but we're not seeing the runway.
No runway yet.
That means the runway is to our right.
At the time, the plane was flying close to the ground. We realized something was wrong.
To complicate matters, there's another plane 2 miles out on final approach to the runway.
Buddha 282, descend to target altitude. Runway 02, clear to land.
Runway 02, clear to land. Descend to altitude. Buddha 282.
What is he doing? BS 211, traffic at final 02 at 2 miles.
The controller warns BS 211 about the inbound plane.
It is one runway. It's a single piece of real estate. And obviously what you can't have is both directions of the runway functioning at once. It's a head-on collision.
BS 211, do not proceed towards runway 20. Traffic is on short final, runway 02. Clear to hold your present position.
Copied. Let us know, sir, once the aircraft lands.
The inbound plane lands on runway 02.
BS 211, runway is clear to land, either runway 02 or 20.
Sir, we would like to land runway 20.
Okay, runway 20, clear to land. Wind 270 degrees, 6 knots.
Copied. Clear to land.
But the plane isn't lining up with the runway.
Bangla Star 211, turn right. You have the runway to land. Confirm you have the runway in sight.
Negative. Where is the runway?
Sir, runway 3 o'clock.
Affirmative. We have runway in sight. Request clear to land, sir.
BS 211, clear to land. He's lining up for the taxiway. BS 211, that is not the runway. Over, that's not the runway. BS 211, that is not the runway. I say again.
The pilots make a last-minute adjustment to try to line up their plane with the runway.
He's past the threshold, and at that point, the controllers are certainly clear that there is something wrong.
We have the runway in sight.
Oh my God, sir.
But the airplane is headed directly for the control tower instead. US-Bangla Airlines Flight 211 flies wildly off course towards the control tower in Kathmandu.
They think that this plane is flying into them. The air traffic controllers duck. The captain swerves straight past them and directly over the passenger terminal before turning again. He's flying this Dash 8 twin-propeller plane like it's a fighter jet.
The pilots of US-Bangla 211 struggle desperately to get their plane safely on the ground.
We felt scared. We were praying to God.
Sir! Sir!
He manages to almost line up with the runway, and he touches one wheel on the runway about a third or half of the way down.
I saw the aircraft skid off the runway.
People were thrown around violently inside the plane.
US-Bangla 211 bursts into flames 440 meters from the runway. Firefighter Sagar Rayamaji witnesses the entire crash.
When I saw the explosion, I thought that no one was alive there. Our fire trucks were immediately on the crash site.
People who were conscious started crying and screaming. We headed towards a hole where the light was coming from. I fell on the ground after walking a few steps away from the plane.
Not everyone is so fortunate. 49 people are dead, including both pilots. At a Kathmandu hospital, family and friends wait for news of their loved ones. Of the 22 passengers who survived, 2 die in hospital. A multinational commission is formed to investigate the tragedy. It consists of delegates from Nepal, Bangladesh, and Canada representing the Canadian manufacturer of the Dash 8, Bombardier.
Let's see what the wreckage can tell us.
The objective of the investigation was to find out the actual cause of accident and to try to prevent similar accident in the future.
Looks like the plane veered off the runway. Kept going for a while. Hit this berm, then flipped upside down.
What caused the plane to veer off the runway? Was there a mechanical issue with the aircraft?
Hard to tell what was and wasn't working.
The aircraft was broken into 2 pieces. The fuselage was broken, and most of the parts were engulfed in fire, post-crash fire, and the cockpit was completely smashed.
The team gets a lucky break.
Yeah, good work.
The aircraft's flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder have survived the fire. They're sent to Ottawa for analysis by the Canadian Transportation Safety Board. With no solid leads, investigators try to get some clues from the survivors.
Was there anything unusual about the flight?
No, everything seemed fine until we were supposed to land. Then things started to feel different.
मैले झ्यालबाट
When I looked outside the window, I could see people and houses close by. This made me feel that the flight was really close to the ground.
Did the pilot provide any updates on what was happening?
None. As we got closer to landing, things got worse. We hit the ground hard, skidded off the runway.
Thank you.
The survivor's account leaves investigators wondering why BS-211 was flying so erratically. Were the pilots dealing with engine failure or some other mechanical issue?
Cue up the recording to just before the plane landed.
Investigators review video footage of the final seconds of Flight 211.
Well, there were several CCTV security cameras which captured different angles of the aircraft during approach.
Wow. He almost flies right into the control tower.
The plane came approximately 45 feet close to the control tower and it veered hard left to avoid the tower. So it was really surprising. I mean, how could the aircraft make an approach that way?
Another security camera captures the final moments of BS-211.
They're coming in fast. The plane is banking to the right. They touched down more than halfway down the runway. The right landing gear first, then the left.
It touched down pretty hard because the tire marks could be very visible, and it was at an angle of approximately 30 to 35 degrees with the fore and aft axis of the runway.
The CCTV footage confirms the survivor's account that the plane was flying erratically before it crashed.
Play it from the top again.
The video is examined more carefully for evidence of a mechanical failure.
The props were working.
The team quickly rules out engine failure.
It's hard to tell from this if there was a flight control issue.
Investigators are no closer to solving the mystery of BS-211.
I wonder what the controllers can tell us.
Investigators turn to air traffic controllers at Kathmandu Airport to determine if US-Bangla Flight 211 was struggling with a flight control issue.
Did the crew report any mechanical problems?
Quite the opposite. The captain seemed very calm as we offered assistance.
We have the runway in sight.
The crew never sounded an alarm, never said to the ATC they were having any mechanical problem with the aircraft.
Walk me through what happened.
We cleared the plane to land on runway 02, but noticed the plane had passed the runway threshold and was flying parallel to the runway.
BS-211, you were given landing clearance to runway 02.
Affirmative, ma'am.
BS-211, you were going towards runway 20.
They saw that plane was flying towards runway 20. So that was when the air traffic controller realized that there was some problem going on. That's when the confusion started.
But instead of turning left and landing, they flew towards the mountains and turned right. What is he doing? Next thing we knew, they flew right past the tower. We thought maybe they were lost.
Talking to the controls, we could find out that the pilot was totally confused as to where he was. He was not sure about his position.
Can you see the runway? Everything is all set up, but we're not seeing the runway.
Even though the crew didn't report a control problem, investigators still can't rule it out.
Thank you.
Were both pilots disorientated, lost, as they made the final approach?
Let's have a look.
The team examines the charts the pilots used for their approach into Kathmandu.
The Jefferson chart looks fine. What about the arrival route chart? No issues with this one either.
Investigators determined that the pilots had the most recent navigation charts for their approach.
If the charts didn't lead them astray, then what did?
At this point, we are a few weeks into the investigation, and we're still not sure what really went wrong in that flight, and we're very anxious to get our hands on CVR and FDR.
Pull up the data.
BS-211's flight data recorder is ready for analysis. Will it reveal if the pilots were in control of their aircraft?
These are the inputs the captain made to the control column. And these are the actual movements of the flight controls.
Investigators compare the captain's inputs to the actual movements of the plane's flight controls. They make an important discovery.
They're identical. The plane was doing everything the captain commanded it to do.
The flight data recorder did not indicate any malfunction in the aircraft, so we definitely could rule out any flight control problem.
Let's see later in the flight. Take a look at these inputs. They're so extreme.
Bank angle, sink rate.
The data shows Captain Sultan was making some severe inputs to his control column near the end of the flight. This coincides with the survivor's account of what happened.
His maneuvering at low level was completely unorthodox.
Sink rate, bank angle.
If there wasn't a flight control problem, why was the captain flying the plane so erratically?
This is the flight path the plane was supposed to take.
To better understand exactly what the plane was doing as it approached the airport, investigators compile the heading data and chart the exact course of the plane.
And this is the flight path they actually took.
What the data shows is astonishing.
Looks like they drifted way off course.
And flew loops very close to the mountains.
It was very shocking for all of us because that kind of flight pattern we'll not see in a commercial flight. And in spite of our air traffic controller trying to guide them, they actually did not follow the pattern.
Looks like the trouble started right here. 17 miles out when they arrived at Guras waypoint.
Pilots navigate by following a series of waypoints, or GPS locations, along their flight path. Guras is the last waypoint into Kathmandu Airport.
Guras was the point from where they actually started deviating.
Investigators dig deeper into the FDR data to understand why BS-211 drifted off course at Guras.
They programmed the flight management system for a holding pattern over Guras. Here.
The FDR data reveals that the crew pre-programmed a holding pattern about 34 miles before reaching Guras.
And when they reach Guras, it looks like they start their holding pattern.
Right here.
But the heading data shows the crew didn't complete their holding pattern. The question is, why?
We need to know what was going on in that cockpit.
The team turns to the cockpit voice recorder and focuses on what happened as the plane approached Guras.
Let's pick it up where they're descending.
Kathmandu BS-211, descend to 13,500 feet and hold over Guras.
BS-211, descend 13,500 feet, hold at Guras.
Do you remember how to enter or hold? We need to be on the nav page, then press maneuver.
Nav page. Maneuver.
Good.
And then enter the inbound course for Guras.
Very good.
They get their instructions to hold once they arrive at Guras. They program it into the flight management system. Nothing unusual at this point.
Both the pilots were very calm. The captain especially was giving some instructional tips to the co-pilot. It seemed to us there was nothing wrong anywhere at all.
Keep going.
BS-211, Kathmandu approach. Descend to 11,500 feet. Clear for VOR. Approach on runway 02.
BS-211, descend to 11,500 feet. Clear for VOR, runway 02.
As they're still about 3 miles out from the Guras waypoint, the approach controller contacts them to say they no longer have to hold at Guras.
Right here. This is where they should have canceled the hold.
For some reason, the flight crew didn't cancel the hold. And this is a critical phase of flight.
Keep going.
What investigators hear next is even more troubling.
Where's my cigarette? Let me find the thing. Do you know where I've dropped it? Go catch fire.
The captain is smoking in the cockpit?
In the middle of one of the most challenging approaches on Earth. And this guy is fumbling around for a cigarette.
US-Bangla Flight 211 is on approach to Kathmandu Airport
Sir, we're heading into cloud.
when the captain breaks standard operating procedures.
A cockpit is not a place for a cigarette at the best of times. And so now they're both distracted. He's saying, but it might burn. Well, you know, yes, that's one good reason not to drop your cigarette in a cockpit.
He's so distracted he forgets to cancel the hold.
Smoking is strictly prohibited in the cockpit, so it was a gross violation from the captain.
Continue.
Could this have anything to do with why the flight drifted off course at waypoint Guras?
Kathmandu, Bangla 211, overhead Guras at 11,500.
Roger. BS-211, are you holding over Guras?
The controller notices that BS-211 is holding when it should be continuing its approach.
Sir, we're holding.
Tell them we're continuing our approach.
We are continuing approach.
Heading mode on.
Stop. They finally cancel the hold when the approach controller catches the error. He then puts the plane into heading mode.
Heading mode steers the aircraft towards a specific heading selected by the pilot.
It's an instruction to the autopilot to follow whatever heading that the captain sets. It is up to him to ensure that they are flying towards the runway.
In heading mode, the plane is more susceptible to the weather conditions.
He's introduced a serious manual element.
In heading mode, you have to continuously give the heading correction depending on the strength of the wind. So weather has got a lot to do if only the aircraft is flown by its heading mode.
Maybe the wind blew him off course.
Now, we had to consider the role of the weather and the demise of US-Bangla 211.
It was a bit hazy that day.
Investigators examine meteorological records for the day BS-211 crash-landed at Kathmandu Airport.
Runway visibility was still 7 kilometers.
It says here the winds were strong from the west, up to 27 knots.
Unfortunately, a very strong wind was coming from the left-hand side.
They're in heading mode. The winds are from the west. The plane isn't correcting for the winds.
So they drift off course.
Exactly.
The pilots are looking ahead, but the runway is now off to their left.
That made the aircraft to deviate to the right. So the aircraft could not maintain its lateral direction with regard to the wind effect.
Have you seen the runway?
No runway yet.
They never saw the runway and just kept on flying.
Do the before landing checklist.
The crew configures the plane for landing.
Landing gear.
Down 3 green.
The captain called down 3 green, confirming the landing gear was down.
And moments later, a warning sounds indicating the landing gear is up.
The captain says nothing about it.
The landing gear was not down. The landing gear unsafe warning was sounding in the cockpit. I don't know how they could have ignored the warning.
He had lost his situational awareness by then. He actually did not know where his plane was.
Then, he circles around the other end of the runway, narrowly misses the control tower, tries to make a near impossible landing.
We are quite surprised our experienced captain like him would maneuver the aircraft in such a dangerous way. That was really surprising for us.
Sir! Sir!
What could have led the captain to fly this reckless approach?
It seems that he tries to land the plane no matter what. We needed to look into the captain's background.
The captain was a fighter pilot for 10 years with the Bangladesh Air Force.
Investigators delve into Captain Abid Sultan's background and discover that he was a highly experienced pilot.
He flew into Kathmandu regularly.
He joined US-Bangla in 2015, and he was not just a pilot and a captain there, he was also their check pilot. That means it was his job to do check rides for all the other pilots to ensure that they understood the -8s.
With no clear answers as to why Captain Sultan bungled his approach, investigators return to earlier in the CVR recording for answers.
Played from earlier in the flight.
BS-287, please confirm onboard fuel.
Operations 211.
BS-211, go ahead, sir.
Why the hell do you need onboard fuel? Why do you ask me the onboard fuel? Tell me the reason you want to do with onboard fuel. I want a bloody written explanation when I come back to Dhaka.
The captain's vocal pitch and language indicate he was extremely agitated and stressed.
He blows up and wants to know why they're talking to him and why they're asking him this question. Well, they weren't.
BS-211, the request is for BS-287. Safe flight, sir.
Don't talk to me about safe flight. Don't talk to me unless I call you.
He overheard a message and misheard who they were talking to, but he lost his temper and blew up.
He was definitely annoyed, angry, and he was not balanced at that particular moment.
Why is the captain so agitated?
Lamia was the worst trained pilot at US-Bangla, but now she's with another airline.
Investigators now hear signs of an emotionally disturbed captain.
She's bad-mouthing US-Bangla instructors, including me.
He talks about a female colleague who worked with him in the same airline. she accused him of not being a good instructor and not being very competent enough to teach.
It's clear the captain's distraught about the accusations.
But this guy's a professional.
Could a complaint from a former colleague have affected Sultan to the point that he crashed the plane?
I've been weeping, crying. Where did I go wrong?
He's trying to clear his name with the first officer, who is uncomfortable with the whole conversation. He is having some kind of mental breakdown, and she's not in a position to say, you aren't safe to fly, we should turn around.
That's not all investigators discover.
According to this, the captain submitted his resignation the day before his fatal flight.
The day before?
He said he tendered his resignation and he was going to leave the company in 3 months' time, all because of this false accusation from this female colleague.
It's now clear to the team that Captain Sultan was emotionally unstable.
We needed to look into the medical background of the pilot.
Digging deeper into the captain's military records, investigators come across some disturbing information.
In 1993, the Bangladesh Air Force discharges him due to depression.
This depression had been the cause of him being forcibly retired from the military. He didn't leave, he was declared unfit to fly.
A decade later, he starts flying commercially.
He was evaluated in 2003. He was found to be not suffering from any of the effect of the clinical depression, and he was found fit to fly.
Was the airline aware of the captain's medical history?
There's no mention of depression in his entire time with the airlines.
How is it the airline didn't know?
Get this. The mental health reports were self-reported.
Self-reported?
US-Bangla had no idea that the captain had this history or that he'd ever been banned from flying. They were relying on him to report his own mental health.
Did the captain's troubled state of mind ultimately lead to the fatal crash landing of US-Bangla Flight 211?
What's my next source of income?
Investigators continue listening to Flight 211's cockpit voice recorder.
Do I need to cry like this?
No, sir.
You look at me. It's my fault that I haven't been able to train you.
The team hears evidence of a man who was desperate to salvage his reputation.
He was stressed that he was told that he was not a good instructor. He was trying to prove that he was a good instructor, he was a good captain, he was a good teacher.
Do you know that I didn't sleep the entire night? I cried a lot.
To top it all off, the captain was sleep deprived.
We have a clear sign that this is a pilot who should not be flying a plane. He's clearly fatigued. He has not had the requisite number of hours of sleep and rest that he should have had before the flight. It is his duty to tell US-Bangla to contact operations and say, I am not going to be able to fly this plane.
Investigators finally have a clear picture of what happened on board BS-211.
Lamia was the worst trained pilot at US-Bangla. But now she's with another airline.
A seasoned pilot with a history of depression was emotionally distraught after having his competence questioned.
She's bad-mouthing US-Bangla instructors, including me.
He wanted to leave the company, all because a female colleague has questioned his reputation as an instructor. He was very hurt to hear that.
Suffering from fatigue,
You know that I didn't sleep the entire night? And I cried a lot.
he begins his approach into one of the most challenging airports in the world. The captain manages to hold the flight together until
Where's my cigarette?
he breaks standard operating procedure at a critical moment.
Could catch fire.
The distraction causes the captain to mismanage the approach.
Sir, we're heading into cloud.
Consumed by his need to prove to the first officer that he's a good pilot,
Can you see the runway? Everything's all set up, but we're not seeing the runway.
the captain ignores the warning signs that he's not ready for a safe landing.
Landing gear.
Down 3 green.
Instead of calling for a go-around, the disoriented captain flies the plane in circles and tries to make an impossible landing.
Because 211, that is not the runway.
Bank angle, bank angle.
We have the runway in sight.
Sink rate, sink rate.
He was maneuvering at low level, flying around the airfield like some sort of Top Gun pilot. It was absolutely reckless. There is no longer piloting going on. He attempted to land the plane as an act of sheer desperation.
Sir! Sir!
All he wanted to do was land at any cost.
We concluded that it was exclusively human error that contributed to the cause of this particular accident. He totally mismanaged the flight.
Investigators recommend that pilots who have been grounded for medical reasons be given thorough physical and psychological examinations before their license can be renewed.
When I remember that day, I always think that I am lucky to have survived. Many people died, so I thank God. I'm still scared when I think of that day, but yes, I feel lucky.